Uh, I'm leaning on or thinking about probably going to Revelations after we finish Peter. That or hit or John. We've been trying to I've been hopping around picking books that the different apostles wrote. So I think we may start off with John next after Peter. And I figured we'd maybe do Revelations. But this morning we're continuing on with 1 Peter, and we're still in chapter 2 as far as where we left off last week. In the late 1800s, Charles Sheldon wrote a novel called In His Steps. It was about gets involved with Henry Maxwell and his congregation. Through their experiences with this tramp, this body of believers begins to see the submissive sufferings of Jesus in his life and what it means to truly walk in his steps. Now, if you were to rate your natural inclination to being submissive on a scale from 1 to 10, where would you place yourselves? If you're going to rate how submissive you are, where would you be? I'm going to say I'd probably be about 5 or 6. I could do a whole lot better than what I am. Stubbornness, ego, responsibilities and duties at work, and things like that kind of lead me to be a little more stubborn probably than I should be, especially being in the union and being in charge of that. So I could do a lot better than what I am. As we try to follow in Jesus' steps, what do you value most about the path? When you try to imitate Jesus' steps, what do you value most about the path? Well, for me, it's the fact that it's not a treadmill. Each day I'm somewhere different, working on different areas of my life, growing, changing, seeing new scenes, and fighting different battles. And it's not easy. It's hard seeing others. One of my difficult parts is seeing others through Jesus' eyes. I have a hard time with that and forgiving the way he did and things of that. It's a very difficult walk, but it's one that does us very good. Submission does not come easy for any of us, I don't think. I don't know of any person or very few people who it does come easy to. Yet Peter thought it was important, and he cites Jesus Christ as an example. This morning we're going to read 1 Peter 2. We're going to start at chapter 13, verse 13, I'm sorry. And we're going to read through chapter 3 and 7. So we'll start at 1 Peter 2:13, and then we're going to read through to chapter 3 and verse 7. So you want to start us off?
Therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man, for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme, or to the governors as to those who are sent by him, for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men.
As freely as I leave to your liberty for a total of maliciousness, but as the servants of God. Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to be good and gentle, but also to the cold. But this is commendable if you trust conscience toward God, one in whose grief, suffering humbly. For what great is it if, when you are eaten for your faults, you take occasion. But when you do good and suffer, if you take occasion, this is commendable before God. For to this you look forward, because Christ was to suffer for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps.
Who his own self bare our sins in his own body, that we, being dead to sin, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes ye were healed.
For you were like sheep going astray, but had not now come to the shepherd and overseer of your soul. Likewise, be submitted to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of the wife. Then observe your chaste conduct, accompanied by
this man in former times, the holy men entrusted to God, so adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands. As Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, you do good and are not afraid of any terror. Husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as your vessel and as being hers together with the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered.
All right. Thank you. We find several examples of submission in this passage we're about to look at. What is difficult about each one? What's difficult about being submissive to government? That's it. We like our own way. We say they're usually corrupt, no common sense, no business sense. They're very wasteful, at least when we're not getting our way. That's what we say. Now, if we're getting our way, oh, they're great, they're wonderful. It's the other side that's lost their mind. So it's very much because we think we could do it better. We think we're not getting our way and they can do it better. What about masters, which now we would say bosses? For most of us, that would be a boss. Some jobs may be hard to tell the difference, but we're talking about bosses here. What's hard about being submissive to a boss? Much the same thing as we talked about government. They don't do it the way we would do, so they're wrong. They don't know what they're doing, or just because they're doing what their bosses say, we're saying they're being mean, heartless, cold-hearted. What about husbands? Why is it hard to husbands?
Because society has thrown us into where we're equal with them now. We feel like we don't have to be submissive to them because we can make our own money. It just seems like society has changed that. It's thrown us into the job field.
Yeah.
I can't speak to being submissive to a husband, but I mean, anytime there's two people or any number bigger than two, you can have two different sort of views on anything. And I think, we've been married for 16 years, and there are still some things that we see sort of differently. And when you see something differently, it's hard to just automatically say, oh, the other person's right, or I agree 100% with you, or something like that. And I don't necessarily think that's what submissive means, but it goes back to what Jimmy answered a minute ago with the boss. I mean, we all kind of see things differently and feel like things should be done maybe differently. And it's even in a single one-on-one relationship, it's sometimes hard to give that up.
I think it's all the same thing. It's all about our ego. We think that our way is always the best way, the right way, the best decision, and it's hard just to set that aside and say, okay, you're in charge, you lead and I'll follow. The problem with submitting to and obeying, I think all three, stems from the fact that we are somehow better than them, or at least do their job better than they could, make the decisions better than them. But God never qualifies the command of obedience and submission with, if you deem them worthy, if they've earned your respect better than you. And so we can't let any of that affect whether or not we're submissive and how we follow along with it. We are called to submit and obey regardless of those things. They will be judged and give answer for their part as leaders, as God has set them in their places and given them authority over us. We will answer and be judged for our part as submissive followers to God, to those who has put over us, would be leaders, whether it be leaders, bosses, husbands, parents, elders, whatever it may be. All will stand before God and give account to God. And I don't think, or I didn't feel like it, or I didn't want to, or they were messing up, or they were making dumb decisions, I don't think will be an excuse that will hold much water with God. According to Peter, why should Christians treat governing leaders with respect? Well, we've seen that in the first couple of verses right there, 13 through 15. It says that God has put them there, or allowed them to be there, to maintain a good reputation, and we are to submit to them to obtain a good reputation, not only for ourselves, but for God. If Christians were always cutting up and always rebelling and always doing all these other things, what kind of reputation would Christians have? What kind of reputation would that give God? it wouldn't be a very good one among the world. So we're called to have a good reputation, not only for ourselves, but God. And also he says that if you do these things, if you submit and things, then you won't have to go around worrying and fretting about being punished for doing wrong, because you're obeying what they told you to do.
In my first year as a school teacher, I was at the first teachers meeting. There was a guy that was in my middle school basketball coach, and he was in probably his 20th year of teaching. And we had this meeting and said, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And as we left, I was kind of overwhelmed because it was my first day. And he told me, he said, Daniel, he said, if you do this for 30 years, he said, you'll have about 12 different bosses. And he said, every 2 or 3 years it'll change. He said, you'll have another one. He said, and everyone that comes in will say, we're going to do it this way. And he said, the next one will say, we're going to do it that way. He said, you do it long enough, we'll come back and say, we're going to do it the way we did it 15 years ago. But he said, if you go in and do what you're supposed to do every day, and don't worry about the outside stuff, he said, you'll enjoy yourself a whole lot more. I think about that every year before the school year starts, of what Mr. Strong said, because he's right. And I think as a Christian, we can get bogged down in like the government and the boss and all this kind of stuff. But those things change. The one thing that's constant should be us and living as a Christian. And so, there may be, a good boss or a bad boss or a good leader or a bad leader. And that's probably in the eye of the beholder, but we are the one who has to actually fulfill Christian tasks and duties.
Absolutely. As a Christian, we should be just even. I mean, we're going to have, but situations shouldn't make it. We shouldn't be all over the place right here. We should be consistent. Now, where we're talking about submitting to government and things like that, does that mean we should be a muddy doormat about every single thing the government tells us or orders us to do? No. There are times and exceptions of cases of everything. If we honor all people, love each other, and fear God, then we will stand up in the face of evil tyrannies, as we have done in the past with different world wars, Desert Shield, what's going on in Russia now. Of course, our government got to stepping outside of God's bounds and what we're called to do. Of course, we wouldn't just sit there and just blindly obey. When it comes to standing up for God, we would always remember first and foremost that God is our true master, and we him above everything else. So if our government tells us to not preach the gospel, to not do things like that, to not preach biblical teachings and truths, if they ever do make it illegal here, then we would be called to know that, of course. In verses 18 through 21, what connections exist between Christ's suffering and a Christian's submission in a situation such as like slavery or any kind of harsh situation, really? Well, though Christ did nothing wrong, was a good, upright man, he never did anything deserving of the way he was treated and punished. He never asked to be born into poverty, to have himself and his family forced into slave labor, to watch his father literally be worked to death, to be born into a nation that was in bondage. Yet he bore it all patiently, evenly, and joyfully. He honored God with all he did and said, and we should be the same way, whether we're born into slavery, whether we're born into any trying to walk in Jesus' footsteps and bear it the way that he did. And we can see kind of the effects of the way Christ endured this suffering and some of the benefits of it. It drew a lot of people to him. And of course, by him doing that, it ended up freeing us from sin, gives us righteousness, right standing with God. We are healed by his wounds, gave us a shepherd in the garden. So a lot of benefits come from Jesus in the way he suffered. And if we endure it, we will impart some of those same benefits to others. In verse 23, it says that in his suffering, Jesus entrusted himself to him who judges justly. How might a similar trust in God help us to submit to the necessary suffering that has to come in our own lives? Well, whatever is going on in our life, it is because God has, for whatever reasons, allowed it to be there. It may be there in the case of Joseph to put us in a place where we need to be, to learn skills and abilities we need in the future. Joseph was hated by his brother. Then he got to a pretty good position in Potiphar's house. Then he was thrown into prison. Then he helped these guys. Says, "Hey, remember me?" And of course, they forgot all about him and everything. But Joseph went through all these things so he could learn Egyptian, so he could learn the rules and stuff of society, so he could be put in the right connection with Potiphar, with the prison, and with these people. All these things on the outside look like Joseph was being treated horribly, but it was all God setting him up for the roles and the responsibility he would have in the future. And of course, Joseph bore them all very well, and that's what's sweet. And it may be in a case as be painful, and as in the Christ case, it may be painful and undeserved, but is necessary nonetheless. Or it may be the result of bad choices on our part, as it was with Lot, David, Samson. All these men messed up and had things come into their life, but it was because of their bad choices. And now God is teaching us about the consequences of those bad choices, but we must trust him to cause even this to work out for our good if we will trust him and humble ourselves to him as these men did. But in either case, the suffering must continue until either we learn the lesson, the skills, the training God needs us, or until his will is accomplished. So regardless, we're going to go through these hard times. We're going to go through these difficulties, these struggles. And it's both needed and beneficial, so we might as well make the best out of it, find the joy in it, and take comfort in the fact that God is developing us and those around us, and take great comfort in that and bear it easily or easier. Everyone go ahead and look at verses 24 through 25. Chapter 2, 24 and 25. Now, I want everyone just to kind of read these verses to yourselves along with me and read it slowly, substituting your own name in the appropriate pronouns. And then think about specific ways you have seen Christ's work here in the verses that spelled out here. It says, and Jesus himself bore Ben's sins and his body on the cross, so that Ben might die to sin and live to righteousness. For by Jesus' wounds, Ben was healed. For Ben was continually straying like sheep, but now Ben has been returned to the shepherd and has a guardian over Ben's soul. Jesus himself brought Benjamin's sins into his own body upon the cross, so that Benjamin might die to sins and live righteousness. Benjamin now has a shepherd over his soul. He was continually going astray, but Jesus, with that shepherd's hook, was always bringing the Holy Spirit and with his conscience. I've seen this live out my life. No longer do I feel condemned by my past sins, because I know that Jesus took my sins into his own body. Jesus paid for my sins upon that cross, so I don't have to feel guilty. I don't have to worry about these sins or if I'm going to heaven. I was able to walk away and leave these things. And so this is a very comforting verse to me. Now in chapter 3, Peter moves on to marriage and the way we are to treat our spouses. In verses 1 through 6, which kind of maybe on the wife's side might seem, he spent 6 verses dealing with the women, and but it's all going to work out to the good here, I think. First, what are the instructions he has given to the wives? And second, what is good about each one of these and what is hard about each one of these? Well, the first instruction he gives is to be subject or submissive, to place yourself under authority to your husband. So what's good or what can be good about this if you do this?
Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husband, that even if some do not obey his word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives. When they observe things, conduct, account without fear, and do not cut your adornment in merely outward, arranging hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel.
Thank you, Ellen. So what's good and about placing yourself under authority of someone else, your husband? Well, I've got on here and go ahead.
I might be jumping ahead into what you were going to say here, but I think when we think about submission or authority, it's not to be overbearing or burdensome on the other person. That's not necessarily exactly for the first verse, but I think that's the overarching thing, maybe, but I might have took your
Now, we're going to tie that in with when we get down there to verse 7 with the husbands. But I think it could be good because it reduces stress and worries. When you're not the one that has to be in charge, when you're not the one that called to make the decisions, you can maybe let some stuff go. Okay, I don't have to worry about that. He's got that took care of. It's his job. It's his responsibility. I ain't going to worry about that. I ain't going to fret about that. Yes. Frees you up. Now, what can be hard about that? Well, she said they could make unwise decisions. So that could be something hard to do with that. Hard to let someone else be in charge and let go of the reins because they will mess up. And they will. And they will. There's no doubt about that. We're going to make, speaking for husbands everywhere, we're going to make some dumb decisions. We're going to mess up. I mean, it is. And I'm sure that's hard to live with as a wife. The next instruction it gives is pure and respectful behavior. What is good about having pure and respected behavior? Y'all gonna make this hard, don't you? Well, it builds witnesses, builds your witness up. If you have good, respectful behavior, of course, people are going to see that. It's going to give you more credibility and sharing gospel with others. It's going to add jewels to your crown in heaven. But it's hard because of the flesh. Hey, you messed up. You know, we want to just to be gentle and quiet spirit, as the Bible says. Now let's look down at the husband's responsibilities in verse 7. It says, dwell with them. And that word, when you stretch out, means to be faithful to them, to remain with them. Don't ever leave their side. Don't abandon them. So I can speak a little more to this. So what's good about this? Well, it creates a stable home life. If your wife knows that you love her unconditional, that you're never leaving her, you're never messing around on her, that she can count on you, then that creates a good, stable home life. It's good because God commanded it that way. What's hard about that? Well, the world teaches us to take the easy way out. When things go rough, whenever you hit a rough patch, the world teaches you, hey, just get on out there. Just get a divorce and just go on and find something else or whatever to take the easy way out. But that's not what we're called to do or be. Yeah.
So if you look at it, we read verses 24 and 25 a minute ago.
Yes.
You sub your name in.
Yeah.
Then every time. So verse 3, or excuse me, chapter 3, verse 1 and chapter 3, verse 7, they both start the same way. One says wives, one says husbands. But the word likewise comes after both. Now, to me, it doesn't make sense for it to say wives likewise when you're not talking about the husband. But what that's referencing there is what Jesus did for us. And so the wife should likewise have a desire to help the other, just like Jesus desired to help us. But then you get down to verse 7, husbands likewise. The husband should likewise desire to do everything they can to help the other one. So to me, we have an opinion, I guess, of the word submissive, and a negative opinion a lot of times of the word submissive. But to me, I almost read these as both saying, what did Jesus do for us, or what did Jesus do for the church? How was Jesus trying to help that? Husbands do that as well. Like that word appears to us to be emulating Christ more than anything else.
Right. And then next thing for the husband is giving honor to them. That is, employ your God-given strengths, your God-given authority on behalf of them. Honor her by becoming her protector and her supporter. The word here not only means respectful of her needs and wishes, but also signifies maintenance to provide for her. And it goes back to what Daniel was saying about emulating Christ. Christ is the husband, the head of the church for us. And Jesus used all these things that he did. Everything he did for us. And it's called for the husbands to be that same kind of pattern. It says, give her understanding, be patient with her. Now everyone go ahead and turn to Ephesians chapter 5. And we're going to read one more verse about husbands and wives here just to kind of tie us in. Ephesians chapter 5. And we're going to read verses 22 through 33. And just pick up wherever we left off. I think we left off with Kevin or Leland, I'm not sure which. But read verses 22 through 33.
Just as the church is subject to Christ, so that the wives be their own husbands in everything.
Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself for his church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish.
So all men to love their wives with their own bodies, either love with his wife, love with himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, and nourished it even with the Lord's church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his body.
With his father and mother, and shall be joined into his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning the Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you know his wife, even as himself. And the wife see that she reverence her husband.
Okay, now to me, there's kind of a recurring theme. One, we're to treat each other like what Daniel was tying in, the way that Christ treated us. Here in the husbands and wives, there are many passages like this, and the one we just read in 1 Peter. And it would seem that there are quite a few reasons for this command. And one of the ones that's obviously men and women are built different, designed very different from each other. There's books out there, men are for Mars, women are for Venus, and all these other things that celebrates or teaches us about these differences. Psychology as well, not only emotional, but psychological as well. And I'm speaking here in generalities. There are going to be exceptions to everything, but generally, they're very different. From my past experience in marriage counseling and things of that nature, and that's been a long, long ago, society has changed a lot since I was doing this back in the 90s. It'd be different now, I don't know. But from what I observed in most part, and y'all feel free to correct me if you think I'm way off base here, but if you were to ask men and women what the number one most important thing they need, crave, that they feel that they must receive or have from their spouse, it would be different. If you were to ask men, the answer you would get from most men would be respected or honored, to be treated with respect and honor from a spouse. But if you was to ask women, it would be totally unfailing, unconditional love. I think that's what most women crave above anything else, is that faithful, unconditional faithfulness to them no matter what. Not only do they crave these things, but they need them or they cannot offer to their spouse. A man who does not feel he has his wife's respect, that she does not honor him, will not be and cannot offer her unconditional love like she needs. He will become withdrawn and hold back. And same way with the wife, if she doesn't feel her husband loves her totally and unconditionally, is completely faithful to her, who's not there for her emotionally and physically, she cannot respect and honor her husband. She will become more and more hateful and withdrawn, and the marriage will just stagnate into where it's the coldest, loveless one if it holds up at all. And it'll just be one continual fight after the other, or end in divorce. talk so much about do not be unequally yoked. And them used to teach at Maple Avenue says don't ever date a woman if you're not willing to marry that person. If that's not someone you want to marry, don't even bother dating her, because don't go down that path, or you may end up something like that. But the Bible addresses that too. It says, now, if you're both on safe state, then the wife becomes a Christian. He says, don't leave the husband. He says you may win him over by your good behavior, but like you said, it's very, very hard to do that when you have someone who's not fulfilling their part. And it's nearly impossible. It's very hard to do. I've seen a lot of counseling sessions and stuff like that where you've one trying to hold the marriage together and the other one just isn't willing or isn't doing their part. And a lot of people don't want to fight. Marriage is not an easy walk. I've never met a single person who's been married and said, oh, it's been sunshine. It's just the easiest thing. It's work. You have to put in the work. And if you're not put in the work, you cannot hold up. But these differences are even built into the wedding vows. If you was to look at the wedding vows, it's even built for the husband. It says, whom do you take this woman who you hold by the hand to be true, to be your true lawful wife, to love her, to cherish her, joy and pain and sickness and health, forsaking all others, to cleave to her only as long as you both so live. And so right there is what the wife needs. She needs you to uphold these vows, to cling to her, so she can know that no matter what else goes wrong, what else on in the world, she knows she can count on you. You're going to be there for her. To the wife, it says, do you take this man whom now your hand you hold to be your lawful and true husband, to love, to honor, to obey him in your joy and your pain, in your sickness or your health, forsaking all others, and cleave to him only, so long as you both so live. And like I said, there's exceptions to both rules, but for the most part, that's what you need. If your spouse, if your husband or your wife isn't being respectful or honor to you, what do you love them? Do you cherish them as you should? Does she know that she can count on you no matter what? It's kind of like that saying, whatever you want the world to be more of, to go out there and be that. If you think the world should be more loving, go out there and be more loving. If you think the world should be friendlier, go out there and be friendly. And it's the same way. If you want your spouse to be more whatever you need, go out there and be more for her or him. Any comments or questions before we move on to that? Hopefully I didn't get myself too deep answering for everybody, but that was the male perspective of it anyway. So, walking in Jesus' steps will often lead to submission and even to suffering. Despite this hardship, why might we choose this path? Well, because it not only leads us to salvation, but others around us as well, according to the verses we just read about all these things where we put Jesus' name in there and our name in there. If we do these things, we will help others as well. What is one area in the foreseeable future where you could practice your Christian submission to work on to become better at? Well, mine's going to be for my boss at work. And that's a very hard one for me. I need to work on being less assertive and more flexible with them and things of that nature. You all hopefully will think of some area in your life where you're maybe not submissive as you should be, and just try to find a way to bring balance to that. Let's see. On this next section, I would call it, if I'm living right, then why do I hurt and suffer so much, if you had to put a title on it? We often assume a direct connection between living right and easy living. It's It's an added pat on the back when life is smooth and easy, but when trouble and suffering hit, the assumption becomes an unspoken accusation. We turn on ourselves and question what we have done wrong, or conversely, we feel that God has cheated us, that he has somehow owes us payment for all the good behavior we've done. And this is nothing new. It goes way back to even back in the Bible. When the disciples seen this blind man, they said, Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? And we just automatically assume that something's wrong whenever bad times hit us. But sometimes bad things happen to good people, sometimes precisely because they're doing good. For example, you stop to help someone on the side of the road and your car gets hit. You help someone to move into their new house and you hurt your back. You let your neighbor borrow your lawnmower and they bring it back broken. So why do bad things like these sometimes happen? Well, a lot of times it's just the devil trying to demotivate you to keep you from doing good work, to get you to fly off the handle and to ruin your witness, to have something to accuse you about. Sometimes it's just to test your nature, to show you where you need to grow at and work on when you see your behavior fly off like this, to show you what's really important in life, to witness to others, and part of just living in a fallen world. Peter, or Jesus for that matter, makes no promises of easy living. And sometimes suffering comes whether or not we earn it, just as it came to Jesus. So let's go ahead and we're going to read verses chapter 3. And we're going to continue reading, and we're going to read verses 8 through 22. Well, I guess we'll wait till next week. That way we've got it fresh in our mind. We're about out of time here. But we'll pick up our next week. If you want to be reading ahead, we're going to be next section. We're going to be looking at verses all the way to 3:22. Any questions or comments or anything before we close up? All right. Thank you all.